Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a world of wooden shoes, chamber pots, and deeply suspicious meat pies. You're waking up in a medieval village and, spoiler alert, you probably won't survive the day. From biting cold mornings to suspicious stew and the occasional rogue pig, it's going to be a bumpy ride. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The rooster's been screaming for what feels like hours. You're not even sure if it's dawn or just a cruel prank from the bird. You blink your eyes open to find straw, bits of it poking your skin through the threadbare linen that passes for a sheet. There's a faint, earthy smell mixed with something chickeny. And yes, that's because a real live chicken is wandering around your tiny room, pecking yesterday's crumbs off the floor. You stretch and immediately regret it. The wooden slats under your straw mattress creak like they're complaining louder than you are. Your back aches, probably from sleeping like a pretzel, and probably because your pillow is actually just a burlap sack full of sheep's wool, and not the soft kind. You scratch the side of your neck. Flea bite. Or 5. Your room has no windows, just a tiny hole in the wall stuffed with cloth to keep out the cold. It didn't work. You slept with your tunic on because the medieval night doesn't care if you're cozy. It cares if you're not frozen solid. There's no such thing as central heating. Just a small fireplace in the main room that's gone cold, and you're not allowed to use it unless you're lighting it for someone wealthier than you. You groan and sit up. Time to get dressed, which means you're already dressed. You slept in your only set of clothes. You sniff your sleeve. Mistake. You smell like hay, damp wool, and a faint trace of goat. You vaguely remember spilling ale on yourself yesterday, which means you're now sticky and chilly. Shoes? If you're lucky, you've got wooden clogs lined with a bit of animal fat-soaked cloth. If not, your feet are about to get very intimate with the icy dirt floor. Historians still argue whether poor villagers really went barefoot year-round, but it's safe to say your toes are numb either way. You try to head out, but the door's swollen from last night's rain. You shove it hard and it creaks open. The morning air hits your face like a wet slap. You step outside and immediately inhale the fresh, medieval morning. It smells like wet straw, burning peat, and something you really hope isn't human waste. Your neighbor, Gertrude, is already awake and yelling at her pig, who has somehow escaped again. She gives you a nod, then resumes chasing the animal with a wooden spoon. The pig, obviously, is winning. You walk toward the well, passing puddles of who knows what, and trying not to step on anything too squishy. A rooster charges at your leg. You don't flinch. You're too tired to care. As you pump the well, the water comes out painfully cold. You splash some on your face, which only wakes you up enough to realize how miserable this is. You grab a bucketful for the house, muscles already aching from yesterday's field work. You're a peasant or a servant if you're in town, so your day started before the sun even got fully comfortable. You drag the water back inside, time to make a fire. Except there's no matchbox or lighter, just flint, steel, and a whole lot of praying. You strike the flint again, and again, and again. Your fingers are numb, and you're starting to think your fire-starting skills are cursed. Finally, a tiny spark catches. You blow gently. It goes out. You consider crying. After 5 more tries and some whispered profanity, the kindling catches. You heat a small pan over the embers and drop in whatever's left from yesterday's bread. Dry, stale, and likely gnawed on by something overnight. You soften it in some goat's milk and sprinkle a few herbs on it, like that'll help. It doesn't. You eat in silence. A fly lands on your spoon. You wave it away. It comes back. You give up. Your younger sibling wakes up crying, probably hungry. You hand them a corner of the bread mush and they try to chew it with 2 teeth. You suddenly remember you forgot to milk the goat yesterday. Oops. Your morning's barely begun, and already it's exhausting. And dirty. Everything is dirty. The walls are smoke-stained from the fireplace. The floor is a mix of mud, straw, and crumbs. You sweep it out with a branch broom, mostly just moving the dirt from one spot to another. You sneeze. Twice. Congratulations. You probably now have what passes for the flu, and no real way to treat it. As you scrub out a cooking pot with sand, yes, sand, because soap is expensive, you hear the church bells toll. It's not Sunday, so this means it's already past first light. You're running behind. Time to feed the chickens. You grab a scoop of yesterday's leftover grain and hope the mice didn't get to it. One pecks your hand. You mutter under your breath. Historians still debate whether poultry were truly as vicious as modern backyard owners claim. But you're convinced this one has a vendetta. You lean against the cold doorway, chewing the last crust of bread. A breeze rattles the shutters. There's mud on your ankles. Your tunic is wrinkled. And there's probably a splinter in your heel from stepping on that broken floorboard. And it's not even breakfast time yet. Breakfast time, such as it is. You glance at the table, or more accurately, the rough wooden plank nailed to 2 crates, and try not to sigh too loudly. There's no glorious spread, no fried eggs, no golden toast dripping with butter. There's a heel of brown bread so tough it could double as a doorstop, and a small wedge of cheese that's sweating slightly even in the cold. You eye the bread suspiciously. It's heavy, cracked, and smells faintly like old hay. That's because it's made with coarse barley or rye flour, maybe with some ground peas or beans if your family's been creative. Historians still argue whether medieval bread was deliberately hard to make you chew slowly or just badly made. Either way, you nearly crack a tooth. You wash it down with, brace yourself, lukewarm ale. Yes, ale. Not water. Water is for washing, and even that's a gamble. The village well might be clean, but probably isn't. So people drink weak ale brewed with boiled water and a touch of hops, even kids. You grimace at the taste. It's sour and bitter, but at least it won't give you dysentery. Probably. You tear off a chunk of cheese. It's crumbly, a little moldy on the edge, but you eat it anyway. Food waste isn't a thing. If it's not moving or visibly alive, it's edible. You eat in silence. No one talks much during meals. 1, you're too tired. 2, talking with your mouth full is considered rude. And 3, the longer you linger, the more likely someone is to ask you to share your bread. So you chew, and chew, and chew. A fly lands on your crust. You flick it off. It returns. You flick again. Welcome to the medieval breakfast ritual. You glance across the room at your neighbor's kid, who's enthusiastically eating something that may or may not be turnip porridge. He sneezes into it. No one reacts. Germ theory won't be discovered for another few centuries. Someone offers you a bit of dried, salted fish. You decline. You've already suffered enough this morning. You scrape your plate clean with a scrap of crust and wipe your hands on your tunic. It's already stained from yesterday's chores, so who's counting anymore? Breakfast is over in 5 minutes. There's no lingering, no second helpings, and certainly no coffee. You wonder if that's the worst part. It's not, but it's up there. Now comes clean up, which means licking your fingers, wiping down the table with a rag that's seen better centuries, and stacking the wooden bowls near the hearth. You squint. One has something growing on it. You decide to ignore it. You're already late for your morning tasks. You step outside again. It's brighter now, but not warmer. You wrap your cloak tighter if you even have one. Most folks only have a wool tunic and maybe a hood. If it rains, you get wet. If it snows, you get frostbite. If it's windy, well, good luck. You pass an elderly woman throwing slop to her pig. It oinks, unimpressed. A boy chases a goose down the road. The goose is winning. Again, you nod a hello to a traveling peddler passing through. He grunts something back. His cart is full of copper trinkets, dried herbs, and a very suspicious sausage. You wonder how long he's been on the road. You also wonder how long that sausage has been on the cart. You're hungry again already. That tiny breakfast didn't do much, but food is scarce and lunch is hours away. The fields are still muddy from last night's rain. If you're a farmer, you're headed out with a spade, hoping your back doesn't give out today. If you're in town, maybe you're a cooper, or a blacksmith's apprentice, or a washerwoman, or a servant. But no matter your job, you're about to burn a lot of calories without the benefit of protein shakes or ergonomic tools. You duck into the alley behind the houses and pass a row of outhouses, or rather, pits with wooden boards over them. You hold your breath. Even in winter, this stench is something special. You realize, quite suddenly, you need to go. You find the closest privy. It's essentially a wooden box with a hole. You balance precariously, praying to every saint you know that the board holds. You finish, wipe with whatever leaf or rag is nearby, and hope no one saw you making the walk of shame. If you're in a wealthier home, serving a merchant or minor lord, things are marginally better. There might be a chamber pot, which someone, probably you, will empty into the street later, usually from a second-story window, ideally not on someone's head. Hopefully. As you walk back, a horse-drawn cart rumbles past you, splashing mud up your shins. You barely flinch. You stopped caring 3 splashes ago. You step back into your home and start to tidy. Or try to. You swat away another fly, sweep the floor again, and pick up a spoon someone dropped in the ashes. You blow on it. Good as new. You check your hands, still covered in flour, ash, and probably some medieval mystery substance. You go to rinse them at the basin near the hearth. The water's cold and a little murky. You rinse anyway. Your standards are not what they once were. A knock at the door. It's your neighbor asking if you can help with the laundry today. You nod. You already regret it. You grab a basket of clothing, sigh deeply, and trudge toward the village stream. This day is far from over. And spoiler alert, It's about to get wetter, colder, and smellier. You make your way down the uneven, muddy path toward the village stream. Your arms are weighed down by a basket full of stained tunics, scratchy woolen hose, and at least one pair of unmentionables that looks like it lost a fight with a goose. The wind picks up as you walk, whistling through the trees and carrying the faint scent of, cow manure. Again. At the stream, a few other women are already gathered, sleeves rolled up, hands red from cold water. They nod in greeting. No one's particularly chatty. Everyone's just cold, wet, and resigned. You find a flat rock, kneel down, feeling the icy ground seep through your knees, and dunk the first tunic into the frigid water. There's no soap. Not really. Maybe a bit of lye or ash if someone was generous. Mostly it's just elbow grease and patience. You beat the wet cloth against the rock, over and over, sending droplets of freezing water back into your face. The tunic doesn't look any cleaner, just wetter and sadder. You sigh. You try scrubbing it with a handful of crushed plant leaves. Someone nearby swears nettles work, but that sounds like a prank. You try it anyway. It doesn't help. You do, however, discover that your hands are now tingling unpleasantly. A woman nearby points at one of your tunics and mutters something about the stain looking cursed. You don't ask what she means. In medieval times, that could mean anything from bad luck to you need a priest immediately. Better not to engage. You wring out the garment and drape it over a bush to dry. It promptly sags into the mud. You pick it up again, defeated, and drape it somewhere higher. Though it's still damp, and now it smells like river. You continue this for what feels like hours, every cloth heavier than the last, your arms aching, back stiff, fingers numb and scraped. You watch a frog leap out of the water and blink at you like, seriously. Historians still argue whether laundry was a daily or weekly affair. But judging by how crusted some of these garments are, you're thinking monthly, maybe longer. It's less about cleanliness and more about survival and the ability to tolerate your own stink. A girl next to you hums a folk tune while scrubbing a pair of hose that could double as medieval armor. They're so stiff. You catch yourself nodding along. The rhythm is kind of nice in a I'm freezing to death, but at least it's in 4/4 time kind of way. Midway through the third tunic, your stomach growls. You had bread and ale this morning, but it feels like a distant memory now. You think longingly of stew, even the watery kind, even the one with questionable gray lumps in it. Someone upstream starts dumping something from a bucket into the stream. You freeze. It's either animal guts or you really don't want to know. Either way, you quickly move your washing spot a few feet downstream. A small improvement, not a solution. You spot your reflection in the water for the first time. Your hair is sticking up in wild tufts. There's a smudge of ash on your cheek, and your expression says, I haven't slept since the last harvest. Not a great look, but pretty average for a medieval day. Suddenly, there's shouting from the road nearby. A cart's wheel has snapped off, and its driver is loudly cursing the carpenter who made it. He kicks the broken spoke and promptly trips into the mud. Everyone stops washing for a moment to enjoy the show. It's the most entertainment anyone's had all week. You wring out one last pair of hose, sigh dramatically, and start gathering the half-dry, vaguely clean clothes. As you do, a breeze blows someone else's shirt into the stream. It floats away slowly like a very sad, wet ghost. You watch it drift downstream. No one chases it. On the way back to the village, your arms are loaded down, your hands raw and freezing, and somehow you've managed to step into a mud puddle deep enough to swallow your entire foot. The wooden clog comes off. You pull it out with a sickening squelch, now soaked inside and out. You pass the tannery on your way home. The smell hits you like a wall, urine, rotting hides, and something you're sure died weeks ago. You hold your breath and shuffle past, but the odor clings to you like a curse. The tanners are busy scraping animal skins, their arms elbow deep in a grayish mix of brine, lime, and old dog droppings. Fun fact, those were standard ingredients. Historians still marvel that anyone willingly worked there. Then again, tanning paid well, mostly because no one else wanted to do it. Back at your house, you hang the damp clothes near the hearth, hoping they dry before they mold. You blow on your freezing hands and think for a second about curling up on the floor for a quick nap. But the day isn't over. Not even close. Someone knocks at the door again. Your neighbor, Gertrude, still holding that same wooden spoon, is asking if you can help carry firewood. You agree because saying no would make you the village villain until next spring. Your arms are already sore, but you trudge out toward the woodpile. You pass a group of kids kicking a pig bladder around like it's a soccer ball. You smirk. That might be the only moment of joy you've seen all day. You pick up a bundle of logs, careful not to get a splinter, or worse, wake whatever bug is hiding inside. The logs are heavy, the kindling smells like mold, and your back creaks like a bad cart axle. You lug it inside, dump it by the hearth, and immediately collapse onto the stool. You're breathing hard. You've barely made it to mid-morning, and your day is just getting started. You sit for a brief moment, elbows on your knees, staring into the embers in the hearth, like they're going to start telling you secrets. Your shoulders ache. Your hands sting. There's still a bit of soap ash crust under your fingernails, and a weird smell coming from your left sleeve. You don't question it. But break time is over. You've still got to get into town. You step outside and immediately wish you hadn't. The wind has picked up. The sun is technically out, but it's mostly just for show. The clouds look like they're scheming something. You wrap your wool cloak tighter around you and begin the trudge toward the center of town. Mud squelches underfoot. Chickens dart across your path. A goose hisses at you. Again, you hiss back. It holds eye contact. The main street isn't paved, just a packed line of dirt, straw, and, well, mystery slop. People throw everything out their windows. Chamber pots, old broth, spoiled milk, anything they don't want inside anymore. It all ends up in the street. Your shoes are already absorbing it like medieval sponges. You breathe through your mouth. As you round the corner, the sounds of town life grow louder. Someone's hammering horseshoes. A dog barks aggressively at a turnip cart. Two women are deep in an argument about whose pig knocked over whose laundry line. The pig in question is asleep in a pile of cabbage leaves, entirely unbothered. The town square is, generously speaking, organized chaos. Stalls line the edges, some covered by patched cloth canopies, others just crates with things piled on top. You walk past baskets of root vegetables, jars of cloudy pickled things, and stacks of fish that were fresh 2 days ago. Maybe. There's a wheel of cheese that looks more like a science experiment, and someone's selling buttons carved from bone. You don't make eye contact. A crier stands in the middle of the square, ringing a bell and yelling something about new tithes. No one listens. Or rather, they're listening while pretending not to. Because if you acknowledge him, that's basically volunteering to pay more taxes, and nobody's doing that today. You make your way past the farrier's shop. Sparks fly from the forge, and the smell of hot iron fills the air. It's kind of comforting in a "this is still better than the tannery" kind of way. You peek inside the blacksmith's open doorway. He's got arms like tree trunks and a permanent scowl, but you still admire the rows of tools neatly hanging on the wall. You wonder what it's like to work with fire and metal all day. Probably not great for your lungs, but at least it's warm. Then there's the gossip. Oh, the gossip. As you pass the baker's, two women are huddled close, whispering like it's a national emergency. Something about Marjorie's sister running off with a traveling lute player. Again. They see you and pause. Then they nod in polite judgment. You nod back carefully. Gossip travels fast, and you don't want to be tomorrow's headline. You reach the baker's window. The smell is heavenly, yeasty, warm, a little smoky. You consider buying a bun, but remember you spent your last coin on a cracked mug last week. You sigh and keep walking. You tell yourself the bread was probably stale anyway. Someone shouts your name. You turn to see your cousin, who works for the apothecary, waving a dried bunch of something vaguely herbal. "Want to chew this? It helps with plague," she says, far too cheerfully. You politely decline. You spot a beggar slumped against the tavern wall. His eyes are half closed, but he hums a familiar tune under his breath. He's missing 2 fingers and most of his teeth, and he smells strongly of fermented cabbage, but he gives you a little salute. You nod. He nods. The mutual respect of people who've seen too much cabbage. Outside the tavern, 2 men are arm wrestling over a dice game. One of them shouts when he loses and throws a mug. It misses and hits a chicken. The chicken flaps once and resumes pecking the ground like nothing happened. Medieval poultry are built different. You stop briefly to look at the notice board nailed to a post. There are a few weathered announcements. A missing sheep, a market day reminder, and a very dramatic drawing of a thief who allegedly stole a goose. You recognize the drawing. You also recognize the goose. They're both fine. You head toward the edge of town where the washing women hang their linens. White sheets sway in the breeze like ghost flags. A boy runs through them laughing, his mother chasing after him with a sandal. She misses. Back near the well, a small crowd has gathered around a man with a puppet show. He's telling some garbled version of a folk tale involving a fox, a bishop, and a magical turnip. The kids love it. The adults pretend they don't. You stop to watch for a minute. The fox puppet squeaks and hits the bishop with a stick. You snort. It's the highlight of your morning. A gust of wind picks up again, tossing your hood back. You pull it up and turn toward home. But not before stepping in a puddle so deep it might actually be a time portal. You don't even react. You just let it happen. By the time you make it back to your door, your cloak is soaked, your shoes are squishing, and you smell like firewood, pickled herring, and defeat. You step inside and drop onto the stool by the hearth, exhaling like a collapsing roof. It's midday, and the stew still isn't ready. The stew pot has been hanging over the fire for hours, but it's not exactly bubbling with promise. You peer into it, stirring with a wooden spoon that's seen too many winters and not enough scrubbings. The contents are ambiguous. A few hunks of turnip, something that might have been a parsnip once, and a piece of meat so small you assume it was donated by accident. Still, your stomach grumbles. The smell is earthy and comforting, even if slightly singed. You ladle a bit into a chipped bowl and try not to think about how long it's been since the pot was last properly cleaned. You take a bite. It's hot, a little bland, but edible. Success. You eat slowly, savoring each mouthful, not because it's delicious, but because it might be your only real meal of the day. As you chew, you feel a warm trickle run down your lip. Turns out your spoon has a crack. It dribbles stew back into the bowl with a sad little plop. You switch to drinking from the bowl instead. Forks won't become common for centuries, so everything is a hand and spoon affair. Mostly hand. Someone knocks on the door. Again. You open it to find your neighbor's youngest child standing there, holding out an onion like it's a sacred offering. Mom says we traded for stew yesterday, she mumbles. You sigh, scoop a ladleful into a bowl, and take the onion in return. It's sprouting. You smile anyway. As you close the door, you notice your cloak steaming gently by the fire. It's finally drying out, though now it smells like wet dog and onions. You move it to a chair and toss another log onto the flames. Sparks rise lazily, and for a brief moment everything feels almost peaceful. Then you hear a crash outside. You rush to the window. It's just two oxen pulling a cart that's toppled sideways into a ditch. The driver is screaming at the animals in French and English, which somehow makes it worse. You go outside to help, along with half the village. The cart is heavy, full of sacks of grain and a suspicious barrel marked fish. The fish smell confirms it. With a few shoves, some rope, and a lot of yelling, the cart is eventually righted. You're rewarded for your efforts with a handful of barley and a pat on the shoulder. You trudge back home, barley in hand, wondering if this counts as lunch. On your way, you pass the baker again. He's selling fresh loaves, meaning slightly less hard than rocks. You trade him your barley, and he hands you a lopsided loaf with a look of extreme indifference. You thank him anyway. Kindness isn't currency here, but politeness might stop you from being spit in. You nibble the bread as you walk. It's chewy, a little burnt, and definitely gritty. Probably stone bits from the millstones. Historians still debate just how much medieval people's teeth suffered from stone residue in bread. But judging by how everyone over 30 looks like they've been chewing gravel since birth, it was definitely not ideal. Back at home, you find your younger sibling has drawn something in the ash near the hearth. It's a horse, maybe, or a goat. You nod appreciatively, and they beam. You pour a little more stew into your bowl and sit on the floor, legs crossed, cloak draped around your shoulders. The fire crackles quietly. Outside, you can hear the sounds of the village still carrying on. Someone chopping wood, another cart rolling by, a faint dispute over pig ownership escalating again. Suddenly, you hear a splash. You rush outside to find a boy soaked head to toe in mud, holding half a turnip and grinning like a maniac. He yells, "I won," before slipping again into the puddle. You consider asking what game they were playing, but decide against it. Some things are better left a mystery. You re-enter the house, brush off your boots. Well, one boot, the other is still damp and squelchy. And sit down again. The stew is cold now. You eat it anyway. Your cousin barges in without knocking. She's breathless and giggling. Did you hear? The priest's goose laid an egg in the confessional. You blink at her. She nods. During Vespers. You blink again. Right onto his shoe. You both laugh until you're wheezing. It's the kind of hysterical, sleep-deprived laughter that only people living in chronic discomfort can truly understand. It feels good. Lunch is over. The stew pot is nearly empty. You scrape the bottom, swishing around the last bit of broth. A chunk of turnip clings to the edge like it's trying to escape. You eat it. Now it's time to clean again. You rinse the bowls in the water basin, trying to pretend that it's not the same water you used earlier to wash your hands. The bowls drip dry on the shelf. You wipe your hands on your tunic again. You realize your shirt has developed a smell, a new one. It's hard to describe. You decide not to investigate further. Just as you sit down to rest, you hear shouting outside. Again. This time it's different. Louder. Meaner. Someone's goat has broken into the grain store, and it's yours. You bolt outside and sprint toward the commotion, cloak flapping wildly behind you like a flag of imminent guilt. The yelling gets louder as you round the corner. There's your goat, head deep inside a burlap sack of oats, happily chewing through what amounts to a month's worth of someone else's dinner. 3 villagers are pointing. One is trying to wave the goat away with a broom, and another is threatening to involve the reeve. You dive forward, grab your goat by the horns, and attempt to pull her backward. She does not budge. She gives you a look that says, "You're embarrassing both of us." You tug harder. She sneezes oats into your face. Eventually, with a combined shove and drag technique, you manage to remove her from the granary and into the street, where she proceeds to act entirely innocent. You apologize profusely to the grain owner, offer what remains of your loaf of bread as penance, and promise, again, that you'll fix the hole in your fence. They grumble, but accept. The broom-wielding woman mutters something about this being just like what your uncle did with that chicken, and you decide it's best not to ask. Dragging the goat home, you tie her securely to a post and give her your sternest glare. She blinks at you, then immediately begins chewing through the rope. Back inside, you collapse onto the stool once more, brushing oats out of your eyebrows and wondering if it's too early to fake a cold and sleep until winter. But no such luck. The door creaks open and someone calls your name. It's your cousin again, eyes wide. "You need to come quick," she says. "The tanner's apprentice lost a bet, and now he has to duel the baker's nephew with wooden spoons." You don't even ask. You just get up and go. At the center of the square, a small crowd has gathered. 2 teenage boys stand awkwardly in the mud, brandishing oversized spoons like dueling rapiers. One has flour in his hair. The other is already bleeding from the nose. A man in robes is shouting something about honor and the rules of single combat, while a very bored-looking chicken walks between them. You find a spot near the bread stall and lean against a post. The match begins. The boys flail wildly, occasionally landing a slap with the flat of their utensils. The crowd cheers, jeers, and places exaggerated bets. One woman swears on her life that the baker's nephew was trained by a monk in spoon fighting. Someone else throws a cabbage. No one knows why. Eventually, the apprentice slips in the mud and lands face first in a puddle. The crowd erupts. The baker's nephew hoists his spoon like a sword of legend and yells something heroic that's completely unintelligible. The tanner, unimpressed, drags his apprentice away by the collar. The crowd begins to disperse, already forgetting what they were cheering about. You wander away, still smiling. A bit of spoon-duel absurdity is exactly what this day needed. You head down the alley near the butcher's shop, only to immediately regret it. The smell is indescribable. Something between rotting meat, old onions, and whatever lives under the floorboards of despair. You try to breathe through your mouth, but that somehow makes it worse. The butcher nods at you from behind his stall, cleaver in hand, elbow deep in what might be a goat carcass. You nod back. He gestures at a slab of meat hanging nearby. "Today's special," he grunts. "Definitely not rat." You politely decline and keep walking. Past the butcher is the cobbler's hut, where a man with spectacles is sewing leather with delicate precision while swearing under his breath. You glance at the shoes in the window. None are your size. None are in your budget. You look down at your mud-caked wooden clogs and sigh. They squeak in reply. A bell rings from the chapel down the road. Not for service, just to announce that it's past mid-afternoon. Time to head home. Again. On the way back, a man with a barrel on his back offers you something he claims is medicinal wine. It smells like regret. You thank him and move on. Near your door, you pass the old widow who lives with 6 cats and insists they're all reincarnated monks. One of them is perched on her shoulder like a pirate parrot, and it hisses at you. You hiss back. She smiles. Inside, your goat has somehow untied herself again and is sleeping peacefully on your straw mattress. You don't have the energy to move her. You just sit on the floor, legs stretched, staring at your ceiling and wondering how much longer you can pretend everything's fine. Outside, someone starts singing a drinking song. A dog barks along, entirely off-key. Your younger sibling toddles in, holding a pine cone like it's a royal scepter. You bow dramatically. They declare you a knight of the mud realm. It's the highest honor you've had all week. You glance at the hearth. The stew pot is empty now, save for a few streaks of cold broth and a single leaf that may have once been parsley. You think about dinner, then decide you'll pretend to be asleep when anyone asks. The lights fading. The wind whistles through the cracks in the walls. You pull your cloak around your shoulders and try to remember if you left that sack of oats open. Again, you're sticky, tired, still smell faintly of goat, and the rope burn on your hand is beginning to swell. And yet, somehow, this is one of your better afternoons. You wake from your brief rest on the floor to the sound of yelling. Again. The voice is gravelly and furious, shouting something about the hides being late, and "Where's the lime water, you daft little fool?" It's the tannery master, which means your shift has officially begun. Your stomach drops. The tannery is a place you try not to think about unless absolutely necessary, but unfortunately, you work there. Or rather, you're apprenticing, which is code for doing all the things no one else wants to touch. You shuffle toward the tannery yard, your boots still damp from yesterday's puddle. The smell hits before the building is even in sight, an unholy blend of rotting flesh, urine, manure, and sulfur. It's as if the air itself is rebelling against the notion of scent. You arrive to find your fellow apprentice, a lanky boy with permanently stained fingernails and an alarming lack of a gag reflex, already elbow deep in a vat of animal hides, soaking in a lovely cocktail of lime and water. Lime softens the hair and skin before the real fun begins. You're handed a long, curved knife and directed to the scraping bench. This is your job now, to scrape. Scrape away every last hair and bit of fat from these limp, soggy skins. It's a fight between blade and flesh, and you're losing. The knife dulls quickly, the hides are slippery, and your wrists ache within minutes. You try not to gag when the wind shifts and blows the stench directly into your mouth. Scraping is meditative in a horrifying way. You zone out as you work, imagining you're somewhere else, anywhere else. Maybe the next village, maybe the distant lands you've heard about from that wandering merchant with the eye patch and questionable maps. Maybe even the future. You picture someone in a clean apron inside a sterile lab, studying old leather shoes and wondering how anyone could live like this. You smile to yourself. Then the tannery master barks your name again, and your fantasy pops like a bloated bladder. Next, you move to the piss pits. Yes, those exist. Collected dog urine is used as a softening agent. You use a long stick to stir a new batch of hides into this noxious bath. You try to hold your breath. You fail. Your eyes water. You wonder again why you didn't become a potter. Historians still argue whether medieval tanners developed long-term immunity to these smells or simply gave up trying to care. Judging by the expression of the master tanner, who seems capable of eating lunch while knee-deep in manure, you suspect it's the latter. Once the hides are soft, they're ready to be tanned with oak bark and more. Special liquids. You help carry one of the hides to the drying rack. It slips. It lands on your foot. You don't scream, but you consider it. By midday, your arms are trembling. The sun is high, making everything stink even worse. You sit down for your break, chewing on a piece of old cheese someone traded you for a favor last week. You're not sure what the favor was anymore, possibly goat-related, but the cheese is surprisingly sharp, or maybe it's just spoiled. You look around at your co-workers. One is napping on a pile of firewood. Another is telling a wildly inappropriate joke about the Reeves' daughter and a donkey. You pretend not to laugh. Another is peeling blisters off his palm with a knife. You close your eyes and lean back against the wall, trying not to think about how many cow parts have touched this very spot. A customer arrives at the front of the shop, a shoemaker looking for tough leather for winter boots. The tannery master haggles with him for a full 10 minutes, shouting back and forth like two angry ducks. Eventually, the shoemaker throws in a bottle of something that smells like elderflower, and the deal is done. You help roll up the hides and tie them together. It takes forever, and by the time you're finished, your shoulders feel like they're made of wood. Before you leave for the day, you're ordered to sweep the courtyard. You mutter a quiet curse and grab the broom. The dust rises immediately, sticking to the sweat on your face. You sneeze. Then you sneeze again. Then the goat appears out of nowhere and sneezes with you. You stare at her. She stares back. You both look away, embarrassed. Job done. You're finally allowed to leave. The walk back is long, and you pass several people who give you wide berth. One even crosses the street. You can't blame them. You smell like someone boiled a boot in cabbage and sadness. You reach the edge of the village just in time to see the smith's apprentice chasing a chicken down the road, shouting threats in Latin. You decide not to ask. When you reach your home, the first thing you do is strip off your outer layer and dunk your arms into a cold water basin. The water turns gray immediately. You splash your face, hoping to wash away the day. Instead, you mostly succeed in making your goat sneeze again. Your sibling peeks in and asks, "Why do you always smell like angry soup?" You throw a crust at them. They giggle and disappear. You collapse onto your stool, too tired to even eat. Your hands throb, your head aches, and your soul smells like liver. And the worst part? You have to do it again tomorrow. You wake up the next morning with the distinct sensation that your body has aged 50 years overnight. Every joint pops, your arms scream in protest, and your hands are locked in a semi-claw position from scraping too many hides. You sit up slowly, only to find your goat sleeping soundly on top of your feet. Again, you wiggle out from under her, splash some water on your face, and head outside. The air is sharp and damp, carrying with it a faint metallic tang and something else, something sweet and wrong. It doesn't take long to figure out why. Down the road, a cart with a faded black cloth is rolling through the village. Two men in long robes and waxed hoods trudge behind it, ringing a bell. A third walks ahead, shouting, "Bring out your dead. Bring out your ill." Your stomach drops. Again. The plague is back, or maybe it never left. It just took a short holiday. You press yourself flat against the wall of a cottage as they pass. You try not to breathe too deeply. One of the men glances your way. His eyes are tired. He nods once. You nod back. When they're gone, you move quickly, ducking through alleys and sticking to narrow side paths, trying to avoid the main square. You're not sick. Not yet. But in this town, that's often not good enough. You recall old Mana, the herb woman who lived just past the stream. She used to make poultices and teas that smelled of mold, but somehow worked. Until one day she coughed in front of the wrong person. She was gone by the next sunrise, accused of plaguecraft, and quietly vanished. Historians still argue whether that meant she was run out of town or something worse. You pass the barber shop and grimace. The barber surgeon is sitting outside, sharpening his blade with the same calm expression you imagine a cat might wear while watching mice fight. He waves you over. You try to pretend you didn't see him. Too late. "Oi," he calls. "You still got that ache in your side?" You did. 3 months ago, you made the mistake of mentioning it while buying turnips. You turn slowly. "It went away," you lie. "Nonsense," he says. "A spleen don't just fix itself." You stare at him. "Could be your humors are imbalanced," he continues. "Could be your bile's gone shy. I'd recommend a light bloodletting, and maybe a dab of leeches on the feet. Set you right." You thank him profusely and walk away much faster than is polite. Leeches. Again. You take the long route to the baker's stall. The line is long, the prices are high, and the bread looks like it's already gone a bit green. You trade a small jar of dried nettle. You found it in a hedge last week for half a loaf. It's still warm, so you consider this a victory. You duck into the alley behind the apothecary to eat in peace, only to be joined by a one-eyed rat who stares at you until you throw it a crumb. It takes the crumb, but doesn't leave. It's either companionship or intimidation. You're not sure which. You overhear two men arguing nearby. "I told you it was the well," one says. "No, it's the baker's boy. He's cursed," says the other. "The stars were wrong last night." Maybe it's the cats. There's too many cats. You bite into your bread. It tastes like damp dust and confusion. A woman passes by, face covered in a sackcloth hood. You glimpse a child's foot poking out from under her cloak. Small, limp, not moving. You don't ask questions. You return home before dusk, scrubbing your hands in vinegar just in case. Your sibling meets you at the door with wild eyes. The barber says I have hot blood, they shout. He says I need a bee sting and a slap to the knee. You nod slowly. We're going to stay inside tonight. The goat is already there, chewing a stolen pair of socks. You light a small fire with twigs and soggy straw. The smoke fills the room in seconds. You cough, your sibling coughs, the goat coughs. You open the door slightly and consider that maybe the smoke helps keep away illness. Or maybe it just prepares your lungs for what's coming. Before bed, your cousin stops by with a cure they bought from a traveling healer. Dried beetles in a sack tied around the neck, said to draw out the plague with their jealous spirits. You say thank you and pretend to believe. As you lie down, wrapped in scratchy wool, you feel the warmth of the fire and the weight of dread in your chest. You don't know if you're sick, but you do know that if you sneeze tomorrow, someone might report it. You close your eyes and try not to think about the sound of the bell. You wake up in the dead of night with a start, disoriented, heart pounding, mouth dry. For a moment you think you heard the bell again, echoing faintly through the fog of dreams. But no, it's quiet. Too quiet, actually, except for the goat. She's snoring. You shift under your wool blanket, trying to get comfortable, but the straw mattress underneath you has developed a new, impressive lump. Possibly a rock. Possibly something worse. You decide to pretend it's just part of the natural landscape. The fire has gone out. The air is cold enough that your breath puffs in little clouds above your face. Your sibling, curled next to you, mumbles something incoherent and punches you in their sleep. You sigh. You lie there, staring up at the wooden ceiling, listening to the subtle creaks of your house settling, or maybe rats. Or ghosts. Hard to tell anymore. Finally, you drift back into sleep, only to be awoken at dawn by the most unwelcome of sounds. The church bell. Not the plague bell, thankfully, but the labor bell, which means it's a feast day, which paradoxically means more work. You groan as you stand. Your back makes a noise like someone snapping kindling. You pull on your outer tunic, it's still damp, and shove your feet into cold boots. You gag slightly. They never quite dried from 2 days ago. You're due at the church by sunrise. It's St. Swithin's Day, or maybe St. Wigbert's, or possibly St. Clotilda's right thumb. There's a feast nearly every week, and the clergy take them all very seriously. You walk through misty streets to the small stone chapel, joining a line of equally grumpy villagers, all wearing expressions that say, "We believe, but not this early." The service begins with droning Latin chants. You kneel on cold stone. You stand. You kneel again. Your knees pop like bubble wrap. The incense wafts thickly through the room, frankincense mostly, mixed with the unmistakable scent of mildew. You wonder if anyone else notices. During the reading, you zone out and start imagining the life of a medieval monk. Peaceful, bookish, quiet. Then you remember they also wake up at 2 a.m., scrub cloisters by hand, and aren't allowed to speak most of the time. You return your attention to the sermon, which now involves a long-winded metaphor about sheep and sin. The priest gestures wildly, accidentally knocking over a candle. It's caught mid-fall by a boy in the front row who receives a round of approving nods from the congregation. After the sermon, you help carry barrels of ale out to the courtyard. Technically, it's blessed ale, meant for communal sharing. Practically, it's just another excuse for people to get tipsy in the name of piety. You sip a little. It's bitter, warm, and has a suspicious twig floating in it. You swallow it anyway. Next comes the procession. You join the slow-moving train of villagers, walking solemnly around the village boundary. It's meant to bless the land and ward off bad spirits. You mostly just trip over roots and try not to step in dung. One man walks barefoot as penance for using bad words during woodcutting. Another drags a cart with a painted statue of Saint Eligius, whose wooden face seems to judge everyone equally. Someone begins to sing. It's off-key. Others join. It somehow gets worse. You continue on, passing the village edge, the half-burnt grain store, and a field full of potatoes that look like they've given up on life. You cross a stream where a girl throws in a flower crown and makes a wish. You do not ask what she wished for. You suspect it was warm bread. Halfway through the walk, someone inevitably steps on a bee, yelps, and causes a domino effect that sends 4 people into a bush. You carry on. After the final blessing at the old boundary stone, a rock that looks suspiciously like a misplaced gravestone, you all head back to the village square for the feast part of the feast day. The mood lifts. Food is brought out, mostly root vegetables and flatbread, but someone even roasts a goose. You catch a whiff, and your stomach growls so loudly it startles the nearby baker. You get a piece of turnip and a sliver of smoked fish that you're 85% sure is legal to eat. You chew slowly, savoring every bite like it's a royal banquet. Across the way, your cousin juggles 3 apples and drops them all into a pig trough. No one seems surprised. A juggler shows up, probably from the next village over, wearing a hat made of rabbit fur and teeth. He tells a joke about St. Cuthbert and flatulence. You laugh harder than you should. Historians still debate how central feast days were to community morale, but today, you get it. It's not just about religion or ritual. It's a moment to remember you're human. You eat, you laugh, you forget that your boots are still wet, and that the goat chewed your blanket again. Someone starts playing a flute. Poorly, but it's better than silence. Children run between tables. An old woman dances in circles until she falls over giggling. You help her up. She kisses your cheek and gives you half a carrot. Later that evening, back home, your sibling presents you with a stick figure drawing titled Saint Goatilda. It features your goat with a halo and a loaf of bread. You pin it to the wall. You sit by the hearth as the sun sets, full belly, sore knees, and a mind slightly less burdened than usual. The church bell rings once, softly, for evening prayer. You stay right where you are. You wake the next morning in an oddly peaceful haze, still half lulled by the warmth of yesterday's feast. There's a strange comfort in the routine, until your sibling hands you a folded note someone slipped under the door. It reads, "The cooper's wife says you gave her the evil eye. Explain yourself before the week ends. Or don't. Up to you." Well, that's something to start the day with. You stare at the note. Your eyes are puffy from bad sleep. Maybe that's what she meant. Or maybe you accidentally frowned at her yesterday while chewing a turnip. Either way, you are now potentially at risk of public shaming, mob judgment, or, worst-case scenario, a mild but persistent haunting. Welcome to medieval social politics, where truth is irrelevant and reputation is survival. You crumple the note and shove it under the straw mattress. Not your first rumor. Probably not your last. Out on the street, people are unusually quiet today. There's tension in the air. A group huddles by the well, whispering behind their hands. You pass them without a word, but you feel their eyes follow you. You remind yourself not to trip, or sneeze, or blink too slowly. Your destination today is the town hall, or rather the central square, where announcements are made. A scroll is nailed to the board. You squint up at it, and someone beside you mutters, 3 fines this week. 2 curfew violations, 1 suspected heretic. You pretend not to hear the last part. You scan the crowd. The tanner's apprentice is crying. The baker's son has a split lip. The town watchman is casually picking food from his teeth with a dagger. You back away slowly. Social life in medieval times isn't about parties or dating apps. It's about survival through perception. You must be helpful, but not too clever. Kind, but not overly friendly. Loyal, but not suspiciously quiet. You've seen what happens when someone stumbles over those invisible lines. You remember a girl named Mila who laughed too loudly during a church procession. The priest frowned once. 3 days later, her father sent her to work up north. No one saw her again. You reach the market square and spot the cooper's wife. She's holding a cabbage and glaring at you like it owes her rent. You raise a hand and smile weakly. She huffs and walks away. A win? Unclear. You head to the cobbler's shop next. You've been meaning to ask about your boots, which have now achieved legendary sogginess. The cobbler greets you with a grunt and gestures to a pair of second-hand shoes that smell faintly of goat and definitely contain hay. You nod in appreciation and offer a half-broken comb as payment. After much side-eye and silent bartering, he accepts. Just as you're about to leave, a man bursts into the shop, red-faced and breathless. "They're holding a trial," he gasps, "down by the stocks. Some idiot called the reeve a donkey with legs." You blink. That could be anyone, including you, accidentally. You follow the crowd to the edge of the square, where a makeshift trial is unfolding. The reeve sits on a stool, wearing a feathered cap that does little to make him appear more respectable. The accused is an old farmer, scratching his beard and squinting as if he's not entirely sure what day it is. "I said he's like a donkey," the farmer explains. "Sturdy, loyal, bit stubborn." The reeve puffs up. "And stupid?" "Well, that part's implied," the farmer mutters. The crowd gasps. You stifle a snort. "The punishment?" "1 day in the stocks and a pie to the face." The town's baker volunteers. He's been saving a particularly stale pie for just such an occasion. You watch as the farmer is locked in place, grumbling all the while. Children throw cabbage leaves at him. Someone sings a song about donkeys. The farmer laughs more than anyone else. Still, you're reminded. Mockery can turn dangerous fast. All it takes is one bad day, one angry official, one wrong word. Historians still argue whether medieval justice was more about punishment or public performance. Today, it's clearly both. You walk home cautiously, rehearsing neutral facial expressions and non-accusatory eyebrow positioning. You pass the cooper's wife again. She now seems distracted by a different neighbor's laundry. Another bullet dodged. That evening, you gather around the hearth with your sibling, who is working on a new drawing, a duck riding a cart labeled Truth Wagon. You don't ask. You both listen to the street outside, the distant clang of a blacksmith, the cry of someone chasing a runaway pig, the muffled argument over whose turn it is to empty the night jar. You sigh, content to have survived another day without being accused of sorcery or donkey slander. Then your goat farts loudly, startling you both. Your sibling points at you and says, "Evil eye." You throw a turnip at them. The goat, now smug, resumes chewing on your new shoes. You've survived another dawn, barely. The air smells of damp wood smoke and someone's attempt at boiled cabbage. You've grown used to the smell of boiled everything, really. But this morning brings an added complication. Your aunt has arrived, completely unannounced, and she's brought news. "You're of age," she says, holding your face between two cold, flour-dusted hands. "It's time you started thinking about marriage." You blink, once, twice. Then you consider climbing out the back window and joining a monastery. You're what, 14? Maybe 15? It's hard to say. No one tracks birthdays exactly, but apparently that's ripe old betrothal age. Congratulations. Your aunt tells you there's a local butcher's daughter looking for a match, or a thatcher's son, or a traveling weaver's apprentice who might be back in the spring if the wolves didn't get him. You nod politely while internally screaming. In medieval times, romance is less candlelight and more contract negotiation. Love is optional. Land is not. Your aunt, taking your silence as enthusiasm, begins listing possible dowry arrangements. A goat, 2 sacks of barley, and maybe a well-maintained spinning wheel. You try not to panic. Later, over a lunch of slightly moldy cheese and some bread you need to saw through, your sibling whispers, "Maybe marry the weaver. At least you'd get nice cloaks." Tempting. You wander the village after the midday bell rings, needing air. You pass a couple arguing near the granary. "I told you," the man growls, "you can't just swap our best chicken for hair ribbons." The woman throws her hands up. "It was 3 ribbons and a comb." They storm off in opposite directions. The chicken is nowhere to be found. You walk past the church where 2 local girls are giggling about a boy who looked directly at me during morning mass. Scandalous. You suppress a smirk. The thing is, most people don't date. They whisper. They write clumsy poetry on scraps of bark. They pass each other herbs for health that are clearly just excuses to make eye contact. And sometimes they get caught. You remember the story of the miller's daughter and the stable hand. Caught kissing behind the alehouse, sentenced to 3 days separation and intense prayer. The scandal rocked the village for weeks. Still, there are those rare couples who seem to genuinely care for one another. You pass the potter and his wife sitting together in the shade, sharing an apple like it's a banquet. He brushes flour from her nose. She swats his hand and calls him a goose. You watch them and wonder, do they like each other, or have they simply survived each other? Later, you're called to help set up for a betrothal gathering in the square. A merchant's daughter is being matched with the Reeves' nephew. The whole thing has a weird air of reluctant celebration, like a party thrown under duress. You hang streamers made of dried flower stems. Someone lights a torch that immediately blows out. A fiddler plays a song that sounds suspiciously like a funeral dirge. The couple stands awkwardly by the table of meat pies, barely speaking. The girl looks at the pie as if considering climbing inside it to escape. Your job is to pass around the courtship bread. It's dry, oversalted, and heart-shaped in the way that a rock can be heart-shaped. You hand it to guests while trying not to lock eyes with the butcher's daughter, who's staring at you like she's already imagined naming your children. You nod, break a piece of the courtship bread, and shove it in your mouth. It tastes like sawdust and regret. Historians still argue how much personal choice people had in medieval marriages. In theory, consent mattered. In practice, property and family alliances usually mattered more. You remember the baker's daughter who once said, "If I marry for love, I'll starve. If I marry for bread, I might still starve, but at least I'll have a roof." You suspect she had a point. That evening back home, your sibling helps you light a single candle. They whisper, "You'll probably just become a wise hermit who lives in the woods." You nod. That's the dream. You'd take frogs over suitors any day. Before bed, your aunt knocks once and pushes in without waiting. "Think on it," she says. "People won't wait forever." You smile politely and say you'll pray for guidance. In reality, you plan to avoid everyone for a week and hope the weaver's apprentice shows up a little bit married already. You lay down in bed, stare up at the thatch roof, and mentally cross off true love from the list of medieval fantasies you had as a child, right next to owning a second pair of shoes and knowing how to swim. You wake to the faint sound of wind rattling your door. It might as well be a gong signaling the start of new drama. Your back still protests every movement, but one thing never rests. Your goat, curled at your feet and snoring like a wooden flute. You stretch and swing your legs off the bed. Cold hits you like a slap. Outside, the dawn light peeks through cloth-stuffed windows, casting a muted glow on your tired tunic. Today, you're expected at the manor. The Reeves' wife wants help preparing for a coming delegation, bigwigs from the neighboring county. You're assigned to help carry trays of salted meat, jars of honey, and those odd little pastries that resemble overgrown biscuits. You traverse the muddy lanes, sheep bleating mournfully in pens, villagers nudging you with gossip. The air smells faintly of roasting meat and too sweet honey, mixed with the ever-present undertone of dung. It's oddly comforting in a "this day might kill me, but at least there's honey" kind of way. At the manor gate, you present yourself. The Reeves' wife eyes you with polite appraisal, like inspecting a loaf of bread too stale to eat. She hands you a woven basket of jars and instructs you to follow the kitchen staff into the great hall. Inside, the atmosphere shifts. You see long wooden tables heaped with food, tapestries hanging limp on stone walls, and candles flickering in iron sconces. You feel out of place, but useful. You step forward, careful not to knock over the trays. Each jar contains honeycomb, dried fruit, or thick mead. A cook wearing a soot-stained apron guides you through the massive hall, past nobles draped in coarse but expensive fabric. You overhear whispers. Impressive peasants on the staff, especially the one carrying the treacle jars. They say that quietly enough that you aren't sure if they're praising or mocking. You set down the tray on a raised dais and step away, trying not to inhale too deeply. Honey might sweeten the day, but the manor air tastes faintly of mildew and too many people. Your next task: refill wooden trencher bowls with slices of raw onions, cubes of salted cheese, and small pieces of spiced meat. The spiced meat smells strong, like cinnamon mixed poorly with offal. You hold your breath, hoping the guests won't notice the aroma. Someone tips you a copper coin as you're leaving, a rare moment of appreciation. You blink, then bow awkwardly. Gratitude feels strange, like foreign currency, but welcome nonetheless. Outside again, you breathe in air that smells fresher, a blend of pine smoke and distant heat from the hearth. The sun feels a bit warmer, as if acknowledging your survival. You walk home slowly, balancing the coin in your palm. Thoughts drift. Maybe this is what passing nights look like for nobles. Small comforts, tiny rewards. At home, your sibling leaps into your arms and proudly shows a new drawing. A cart overrun by goats, labeled Merchant Disaster. You laugh. Your chest tightens with something like hope, or maybe tiredness wearing a fancy hat. Then the Reeves' son appears at your door with a piece of sealing wax and a polite invitation. Your work was noted today. Consider this a small token of thanks. It smells like resin and ambition. You accept, curious. Once inside, you inspect the wax seal. It's emblazoned with the Reeves' dagger symbol, official in a don't lose this kind of way. You tuck it inside your tunic, next to the half-loaf you've saved for dinner later. The day drifts into evening. The wind fades. The hearth's gentle glow illuminates your tired face. There's a fleeting feeling. You might just sneak into the world of small respectability. But as usual, by the time you crawl into bed, your body aches so deeply that sleep feels like surrender. And the goat, predictably, has chosen your head as her new resting place. Still, you survived another day, and the coin in your hand jingles quietly with possibility. You wake to a noise that's part thunder, part shouting, part, oh no. Your sibling bursts in, eyes wide, holding a wooden bucket with both hands like it's a precious gem. Flood, they say. Pigsty broke again. You don't even sigh anymore. You just swing your legs out of bed, feet instantly finding the one soggy floorboard like it's guided by fate. Outside, the early sun glints off puddles, and there's an unmistakable squealing in the distance that means at least one pig is now a free agent. Welcome to medieval plumbing, where drainage means gravity and prayer. You pull on your boots, which squelch, and make your way to the sty, which has exploded in a glorious display of mud, straw, and pork. Your neighbor is already there, shirt half tucked, wielding a rake and muttering things that definitely aren't in the Bible. The pigs, clearly enjoying their new liberties, are sprinting down the lane like toddlers on a sugar high. You give chase, tripping over a loose root and nearly landing face first in something that is, at best, organic. One pig veers toward the churchyard, another goes into the baker's alley. A third, your favorite, simply flops over and refuses to move. Eventually, through a combination of pleading, bribing with beats, and your sibling using a cloak like a net, the pigs are corralled. Mostly. The coop looks like it's been in a mild siege, but the job is done. You wipe your hands on your tunic and realize that smell is not going anywhere soon. As you trudge back, people begin emerging into the daylight. The cooper complains about the mud. The tanner's apprentice blames you for starting the pig riot. Someone says you're cursed, but in a fun way. You grab a chunk of dry bread and call it breakfast. Then you remember, you're scheduled to help dig a new ditch today. The old one didn't survive last week's rainstorm, and if water keeps pooling near the granary, mold will spread faster than a festival rumor. You arrive at the site and are handed a shovel so bent it looks like it gave up halfway through a midlife crisis. Digging is slow, heavy work. The soil is thick with wet straw and forgotten tools. A black beetle the size of your thumb crawls past your foot. You name him Marcus. Halfway through the morning, your back is on fire, and you're no closer to being dry than you were during the pig chase. You pause to drink water from a leather flask that tastes faintly of onion. Nearby, the smith's apprentice tells a story about a well that supposedly leads to an underground city of toad-sized monks. Everyone listens like it's plausible. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed in that kind of thing, the apprentice says proudly, quoting something he probably heard from the priest. Someone else mutters, "They also said you shouldn't put eels in your boots, but here we are." By noon, you've dug maybe 2 feet. Your shovel snaps. You pretend you meant to stop. Lunch is a shared meal of turnip mash and pickled onions eaten on a broken cart. A bee lands on your hand and refuses to leave. You start naming things again. Bee, Gerald, turnip, Sandra, shovel shard, regret. After lunch, you're asked to help spread straw over the driest patches. A child throws a clump of it at your head. You retaliate with the precision of a vengeful falcon. An impromptu straw war erupts. 5 people join. The reeve walks by and frowns just enough to make everyone pretend they were serious all along. Back at home that evening, you scrape mud off your boots and notice your sibling has borrowed your coin from yesterday to trade for 3 buttons and half a lizard skeleton. You both eat a dinner of gruel and pride. Your bones ache. Your hair feels like it was styled by a thunderstorm. But there's a weird satisfaction in it all. You get to be alive. Messy, sore, underfed, but weirdly alive. You curl under your scratchy blanket, the smell of pig lingering in your clothes like a rude memory, and fall asleep before your goat can decide which part of your bedding she's claiming tonight. You're awoken not by birdsong or your sibling jumping on your feet. No, this morning it's bells. Loud, clanging, totally unnecessary bells that are clearly overcompensating for something. You jolt upright, half expecting an invasion. "Market day," your sibling groans from beneath the blanket. Again, you throw on whatever garments are least crusty and brace yourself. Market day in the village is a lot like herding geese with a broom. You'll survive it, but not with your dignity intact. Outside, it's chaos already. Carts creak under the weight of produce, livestock, and someone's clearly haunted spinning wheel. There's a goat tied to a barrel that has absolutely no business being that angry. It sees you and narrows its eyes. You make a note to walk the long way around. Your job today? Helping your neighbor sell jars of pickled turnips and what she calls cured eel bites, though you're almost positive they're just very sad sausages. You station yourself behind the stall, try to look enthusiastic, and immediately get haggled down by a man with 1 tooth and an aggressive scarf. He wants 3 jars for the price of 1, offers you a pebble and a prayer in return. You smile sweetly and tell him the jars bite. The bartering continues all morning. You swap a pot of beetroot mash for a cracked comb. You trade a dried fish for a spoon carved to look like a screaming monk. Somehow you even get rid of the eel bites by calling them a delicacy from the coast. Technically true if you mean the coast of your nightmares. By midday, the market is a whirlwind. A juggler drops flaming sticks. A puppet show ends with children crying. The town crier reads out proclamations none of you care about, but his voice is so dramatic you half expect a dragon to land. You pass the baker's stall and spot a tiny pie with your name on it. Figuratively, though he does offer to brand it for an extra coin. You pass. The pie is warm and filled with, probably turnip. You can't tell anymore. Then a traveling monk appears, robes dusty, eyes sharp. He starts loudly denouncing card games, dice, and laughter in general. Everyone collectively decides to ignore him. A noblewoman's steward tries to sell hair water from the queen's own comb. You ask if it comes with fleas. He glares and mutters about uncultured peasants. Still, for all its madness, there's something comforting about market day. You see familiar faces. Your aunt haggling over goose feathers. The smith's daughter selling brooches she insists are magical. They aren't. Even Marcus the Beetle makes a cameo near the grain sacks. There's community in the mess. You pass around rumors like hot bread. Someone saw a knight's horse in the next village. The miller's wife might be a witch, again. And apparently, someone found a coin with 2 heads. No one sleeps that night, not from fear, but from the endless retelling. Historians still argue whether medieval marketplaces were more about commerce or connection. Honestly, you think it's both. People need food, but they also need to know who's secretly in love with the Reeves' nephew. As the sun begins its slow descent, you help pack up the stall. The jars are lighter now. Your neighbor rewards you with a piece of honeyed flatbread and a wink. You pretend not to gag when she calls you a real merchant's soul. On your way home, you pass a drunk minstrel serenading a chicken. You stop. You applaud. He bows deeply and falls over. The village quiets down as the sky turns orange. You find a moment to sit by the well, nibble on the flatbread, and watch the world slow. You think about the market stalls, the trading, the shouting, the woman who definitely overpaid for the haunted spinning wheel, and you realize this is the closest thing to a festival you get. Back in your cottage, your sibling has already started drawing again. This time, it's a pie fighting a sword. You're the pie. The sword is labeled taxes. You both laugh until the goat snorts indignantly and stomps off. You crawl into bed smelling like fish, pickles, and pride. It's not the worst mix. As your eyes flutter closed, you wonder what next market day will bring. Hopefully, not eel. This time it isn't a goat, a bell, or even a screaming child that wakes you. It's silence. The kind of deep, strange hush that makes you sit up and wonder if the world has ended overnight. Turns out it's just early. Too early. Even the birds seem confused. You creep outside and find the village cloaked in soft mist. Everything muted like someone wrapped the world in wool. For once, nothing smells like dung. It's weirdly beautiful. But don't get comfortable. Today is laundry day. You gather your family's linens, stiff, scratchy, and stained with stories you'd rather forget, and trudge to the stream. It's a communal affair. Every woman, child, and unlucky sibling has their arms full of clothing, buckets, and soapwort paste that smells vaguely like sadness. You find a decent rock and get to work. Cold water soaks your sleeves within seconds. Your fingers go numb. The soap stings your cracked knuckles. And then someone starts singing an off-key song about a merchant who married a cow. Classic laundry banger. You scrub, you twist, you beat the fabric against stone like it insulted your mother. It's oddly therapeutic. Across the stream, a neighbor nods approvingly. Apparently, you have aggressive wash energy. By mid-morning, your arms ache, your back protests, and you're starting to hallucinate conversations with your shirt. But the linens look marginally cleaner, which is the most you can ask for in a world without detergent or mercy. You drape the clothes on bushes and nearby branches, hoping no goat sees them. Last time one ate a sock, she still burps wool. Next chore, flea combing. You sit outside with your sibling and start combing through hair like a sleepy ape. It's not glamorous, but necessary. You find 3 fleas, 1 beetle, and what might have been a crumb from last week's gruel. You flick them away and call it a victory. Someone calls out, "The priest is giving a sermon." You and half the village trudge to the church, less out of devotion, more out of social obligation. Inside, the pews are creaky, the air stuffy, and the sermon mostly about how idle hands are the devil's backup dancers. You try to stay awake. You fail. Your sibling nudges you at the amen. Afterward, the reeve announces that a traveling tax collector is coming next week. The collective groan that follows is so loud it probably echoes in the next kingdom. You head home, the weight of future coin loss already heavy in your pouch. You make a mental list of tradable goods, including, but not limited to, goat milk, broken combs, and sheer charm. Spoiler, the charm never works. Dinner is simple, barley stew with a suspiciously chewy chunk in the middle. You pretend it's turnip. It's probably not. You sit by the hearth with your sibling, quietly braiding dry grass and inventing games. Your goat lies nearby, suspiciously eyeing your clean laundry. Outside, the mist has lifted. Stars peek through gaps in the clouds. Crickets chirp. The village sleeps. You roll into bed, body sore but mind unusually still. You've lived through another day. Not just survived, but participated. You traded, scrubbed, listened, laughed, plotted mild tax evasion. And as you stare at the flickering shadows on your cottage wall, you realize you might actually be, against all logic, good at this. Not at being clean or proper or noble, but at being here, in this odd, muddy, messy world. Tomorrow you'll do it again, and maybe, just maybe, you'll still be standing,